some teachers, especially the teachers grew up in the suburban areas with, under very caring parents and child-oriented parents. If they, started their teaching in large city schools or some rural areas, some financially difficult, disadvantaged areas, and then they will experience very conflict cultural differences, especially most of the teachers start teaching with very naive expectations on students. Because the first reason they chose the teaching field it's because they love children, and to them, children are so live and so cute and so sweet, and they know they are very kind of, disruptive, very just attention wide, they are all over. However, basically, children are just little angels. So their naive expectations on students and children make them really have a hard time in the beginning years because they never expected their little children have never learned any standard gestures and voice tones and talkings and facial expressions showing their manners and respect. So pretty much that's human cultural differences. It's not social societies. So every family has their own cultures. So this is a whole different world they will experience. So these children, just a typical human behavior in a non-linguistic communication method and tools, they may not learn those, they may not experience them, because the children usually learn through imitation and identification and mimicking and copying the people around them. So that's their baby time, that's how they started the teaching and then communication skills. They learn through that, but they never experienced that. And they have no ideas about what's standard, appropriate manners and group life and behaviors. So it's it could be different standards, or they never thought about those from their, home adults. And then some children behaviors in the classroom, it's just their typical habitual behaviors. It's not they intended to disrupt the class or defiant to the teacher or just non-compliance. It's not that. That's not their intention. That is their habitual behaviors they got used to. And then, usually when they behaved like that, and then the adults respond very adversely and very harshly, and they are very get used to it. So when they receive the teachers' frustrated reactions and stressful reactions, and they just shrink their shoulders and then they just move on, because they are so get used to, those adult response. So some children are very, very just, that is a typical experience they get from the, adult aversive attitude. Okay. And then some have never experienced the success in displaying appropriate behaviors. So just simply, they got so used to having those negative, aversive, response and relationships with the adults. And then they believe that's just a typical adult and child relationships. So used to it. So when teacher has naive expectations on students, and then, when they face that, and then it's very, shocking, and then they don't know what to do. So that's the different world and different culture, and then most of the teachers may ignore them and just, only just stay with the darlings and teach them. And then while just, it's not really like intentionally negatively neglecting and ignoring, but they don't know what to do with them. So however, again, our beliefs and perspectives make our behaviors and action differently, right? So if a teacher does not have these naive expectations, and then teacher knows what to expect, and then they already prepared for that. So they knew they faced some of the children, those behaviors instead of, thinking they intentionally they behaved like that to make a teacher frustrated. Instead of taking that way, that's their habitual routine, the behaviors, and then the teacher has to teach proactively and shape their behaviors and then rehearse, those teachings. So until children get used to those behaviors. So even quiet sitting. So they have to, make some sustained sitting with attention so they can learn something. However, they cannot do that overnight by scolding or just punishment or even, praise, or you promise just nice reinforcement the child like. It could be temporary, may work. However, it's, it pretty much, shortly just stopped and then everything is just returned to the beginning point. So children has to physically gradually shaped and get used to sitting, staying in their seat. So teacher has to prepare that, shape those behaviors and then have to show what is a good behavior, what is, not really appropriate behaviors. So one, thing is you could do self-monitoring. So that is you and child agrees, and then, ask the child, you can tape the child and then sit down with the child and watch that tape, the child, how child behaves, or, if the child is a little bit older, and then you ask the child just to do data collection. And then you have the other child has some behavior issues, and then you ask the child to get the data over that peer, and then just write down everything, and then just after class you sit down with the child and talk. So when you ask the child to see just how other children respond, what kind of facial expressions they show, how they got frustrated, or you can tape those, that child, and after class, and then you sit down with the child and then have the, that, screen, and then you just talk with the child. Especially you can ask the child to see other peers' response, their facial expressions, and how they just, it can interrupt the whole class. So this is a little bit older children, you can do that, like because second grade, third grade, still you can start this one, not that too young child. So those, what I'm saying is just you find the way of shape those behaviors, okay? Instead of just, okay, that is the child who he is, who she is, and then you just ignore the child and pretend like, that child is not part of your class. You have to include the child.